Hi, today's topic is dividend policy and internal financing. In today's class, we're going to learn about the trade-off between paying dividends and retaining firms' profits. We also learn about dividend policy, how it affects a company's stock price, and the constraint of dividend policy, commonly used dividend policies and payment procedure. We also know about the non-cash dividend species and stocks when dividends are paid by the use of stock. And we end the class by knowing and be able to distinguish between the use of cash dividends and share opportunities. So one would say dividends, we actually we're trying to know about the shareholders, right? Because the shareholders are the ones actually who get paid their dividends. Shareholders are individuals, institutions, legally own share capital of a public or private corporations. So these shareholders, they are investors and they are paid dividends. Dividends are distributed from the firm's asset to the shareholders. However, firms are not obliged to pay dividends or maintain a consistent policy with regards to dividends. Now, why are firms not obliged to pay dividends or maintain a consistent policy with regards to dividends? This is because if they need to reinvest its operation, or they have the intention of rewarding the investors with a more valuable shares, they withhold all of their profits, and these profits they can use for this reinvestment. So hence, if they are doing all this, so they are not obliged to, or it's not obligated on them to pay their shareholders dividends. But if a firm decides not to pay dividends, it will have more retained profit for reinvestment, and hence its reliance on external finance will be reduced. But if a firm decides to pay large dividends, this means its retained profit will be very small, and they will have to rely on external equity financing. So whether a firm is paying high dividends or low dividends, there are pros to it. Okay, so it's not left for the firm to decide which of the pros it can cope with, or which of the disadvantage it can cope with, and which it cannot cope with. So moving on to the next slide, we're going to see the disadvantage of paying large dividends and also paying small dividends. When we pay large dividends, there is low profit retention, means retained profit, and there will be heavy external equity financing. That means when the firm wants to reinvest, okay, it will definitely be needing finance from other means. But if the firm decides to pay small dividends, it will have high profit retained, and it will have enough retained money for reinvestment. So whichever decision the firm makes, it's okay. It just depends on the firm how they are able to manage the decision they've made. So going back to the first slide, we also going to look at that we also know that dividends can be paid in cash on stocks. Sometimes when firms they want to reinvest, they can actually pay their shareholders with stock instead of cash. That means they will give them more stocks, and this is also beneficial to the firm. They give them more stocks, and the profit on the money which they would have paid out to these shareholders will be retained. Okay, now let's look at dividend policies. When we talk about dividend policies, we're trying to look at the ratio. We look at the payout ratio, and we also try to discuss on the stability of the dividends over time and dividend policy trade-off. So dividend payout ratio means the percentage. Normally dividend payout is based on percentage. The percentage at which the dividends will be paid out by firms is fixed, okay, but the amount which is actually paid out is not fixed, because these shareholders have invested or buy stock at different amounts. They have different amounts, and the dividends is paid to them based on the amount, the total amount which they invested in that company. So just imagine if 25% of 50,000 is not the same thing as 25% of 100,000. So if the percentage is fixed, but the actual amount which the individual shareholders receive varies, is not same. It's based on the total amount which they invested in that company. Let's look at the example in this slide. We have, for example, if dividends per share is $1 and earnings per share is $4, the payout ratio is 25%. That means it will be 1/4. Okay, that means 1/4 is 25%. Now, I already talked about the dividends policy trade-off, okay? Which means retaining decisions between retaining profits and paying more dividends, or paying less dividends and when you retain profit, you pay out less dividends, or you retain less profit and pay out more dividends. And I earlier mentioned that there are pros and cons to it, and it's left for the firms to actually decide which is most beneficial. Okay, but there's one thing you have to know, that if a firm decides not to pay dividends, it will have more retained profit for reinvestment and less reliance on external finance. And paying large dividends means the retaining less of the firm's profit, and they will have to rely on external equity finance more, financing too. And this we already discussed. Now, let's look at the 3 views on the impact of dividends policy on share prices. Okay, the first one is dividend policy is irrelevant. Dividend policy is really irrelevant. It actually implies shareholders' wealth is not affected by dividend policy. And how is this so? This is because dividend policy is irrelevant if the shareholders' wealth is not affected by the dividend policy, whether it's small or big. Okay, whether it's a small is small, if the dividends is small or is very big. I had earlier told you that dividends are paid out based on percentage. So whether it's big or small, the policy is sometimes irrelevant, and I'm going to explain to you how this is irrelevant. This could be irrelevant because from different assumptions. Let's say for the first assumption, it's let's look at the first one, which is capital market. Okay, for example, in a capital market where all investors have same access to same information, where they are, and we have large numbers of buyers and sellers, and both the individual and firms have equal access to the market, there won't be conflict of interest among management and stockholder. That means everything is perfect for all stakeholders. So in this situation, dividend policy will be irrelevant. And when we mention dividend policy, it means a fixed way in which this dividends management is being regulated. So what they are trying to say now is that the dividend policy, there's this view that the dividend policy is irrelevant if we are in a perfect capital market. You know what the meaning of perfect capital market? It means that everything is perfect, okay, and there's no imperfection. So because of that, there might not be any need for dividend policy. Now, looking at the second view, we have the high dividends will increase share prices. Uh, so in this regards, okay, I move to view 2. Okay, this position is based on the bird in hand dividends theory. Okay, there's this saying that a bird in hand is worth millions in a bush, because the ones in that bush, right, there's a lot of uncertainty in the sense that you probably might be able to catch them or catch them. At the same time, it's there's also the possibility that the birds can never get caught. So it's a 50-50% chance, but a bird in hand is like 100% opportunity, because it's already been caught and it's in your hand. So this theory actually reflects this saying, in the sense that tomorrow is very uncertain. Okay, so in this regards, the when a high dividend increase stock value, it's actually is what more. Okay, what more, because the future is uncertain and future capital gain is also very uncertain. So this implies that a higher required rate for discounting $1 of capital gain than a dollar of dividends. So the theory actually says that we should actually value more of that dividends today than the dividends of tomorrow, which is uncertain, which we are not even sure of if it's going to be high, if it's going to be low, or if we're going to get it or not. Okay, so taking a look at view 3, it says that low dividends increases stock values. That means tax rate on capital gains and dividends range from 0 to 20%, and depending on the recipient income and tax bracket. Okay, so like I earlier said, that these things the percentage might be fixed, but the recipient income and tax will be different, because this is usually fixed in percentage. So the thing we need to know about this is that current dividends are taxed immediately, but when we talk about capital gains, they can be deferred. Okay, so any stock that allow tax deferral, we possibly sell at a premium relative stock that require current taxation, and this is very favorable. Okay, so since the tax payment is a deferred, it can be for capital gains, since the tax is deferred until the stock is actually sold, because the stock cannot be taxed while it's still with the owner, right? So it will only be taxed after it has been sold, and hence the tax can be deferred. You can pay at a later date. And if you are going to use the present value of money, the capital gains have definite financial advantage for shareholders, because it's at a deferred payment for the tax aspect. There are other aspects to dividends. Okay, we have the residual dividend theory, we have the clinted effect, we have the information effect, and we have the agency cost and expectation theory. We are going to talk about each of these items mentioned. When we talk about residual dividends policy, it actually owes zero excess cash at any given point in time. That is, all residual or spare cash must be either reinvested in the business or redistributed among the shareholders. There shouldn't be any money left unused. Okay, money left unused actually does not yield any profit. Okay, so like what most firms do, they kind of either use this money to pay out to their shareholders as dividends. At least you are giving the investor the satisfaction he or she wants, right? Their intention is to actually invest this money and be part of the company's profit making. So instead of holding this money, the money is just there, and you've actually used what you need to use for reinvestment. The firms have actually used what they need to use for investment. They can actually redistribute them among their shareholders to pay out this money. Okay, so the residual dividend theory actually determines the optimal capital budget. It can help determine the optimal capital budget, and at the same time, it can determine the amount of equity needed for financing. That means it's first use retained earnings to supply its equity, because this retained earnings, before you can say residual, means it's a spare amount that is there after all the equity you've done the reinvestment. And after that, the retained earnings is still available, they distribute this residual as extra as dividends to the shareholders. Now, when we talk about dividend policy, dividend policy can be influenced by investment opportunities and availability of internally generated capital. When we say investment opportunity, it means that the dividend policy is there, but if investment opportunity comes, this dividend policy might be override. Okay, and the firm will opt for the option of reinvesting this retained profit instead of paying them out as dividends. And the utmost one of the objectives of a company is to be able to generate more profit, and profit can only come, or profits can be made, if the firm keeps reinvesting. Okay, I mean, not risky investment, okay, but those kind of investment that will give higher dividends, that will make them be able to pay higher dividends to their investors, the shareholders. So the firms always prioritize investment, okay, opportunities, and this can actually override whatever dividend policy that has been made. I mean, if a company can actually not be obliged to pay the dividends zero kobo, I mean zero nothing, $0 or zero nothing, that means there is no obligatory on them that they must pay dividends if only they are going to reinvest. So you can imagine, so if investment opportunity should come, they can as well also ignore this dividend policy and go ahead to reinvest or for capital budgeting needs. Okay. Now, dividend policy could also be influenced by availability of internally generated capital. Okay, and means that if they actually have enough capital, this could also affect the dividend policy. Maybe they could as well even pay more, okay, and this might not be the same with what has been agreed on the dividend policy. So moving on, let's look at the clientele effect. Okay, the different groups of investors have very preferences towards dividends. Yes, they have preferences towards dividends, and like I said before, we have the preference shareholders and the ordinary shareholders, and I try to look at the advantages and disadvantages of each of the shareholders. Okay, so the clientele effect actually it actually affects the dividends that is to be paid out. If the client is an ordinary shareholders, the amount that is going to be paid is not same if the investor or shareholder is a preference shareholder. Okay, this is known as the clientele effect. Now we also have the information effect. The information effect is that, like I made mention of the perfect capital market, where all the investors and the firms, they have equal opportunity and access to information. So this is the for example, if they don't have, it's not a perfect, for example, it's not a perfect market, for example, and both the investors and management, let's say for example, they don't have access to how do you call it, they don't both have opportunity to information. Okay, this will not this will actually make the dividends payment and shareholders expectation differ. Okay, but however, if the dividend payment and shareholders expectation it's same, market price of stock will remain unchanged. Okay, and this deviation from expectation should be minimized and avoided, because if a free dividends policy is not is a kind of signal, okay, to a significant impact. It has a very big significant impact on the stock prices. If it's not same, stock prices will definitely be affected, and the stock price will change. And if it's same, there's a very high percentage that the stock price will not be affected. So also, a firm that pays the amount of dividends, or pays out its dividends just like the way the shareholders is expecting, is seen as a very strong firm. Okay, it actually refers the firm's financial condition, because high dividends could actually signal expectation of high earnings in the future and vice versa. Okay, now let's look at agency costs. Agency costs arises in the wake of core inefficiency or disruption, such as conflicts of interest between the shareholders and management. There is there is no agency cost if the market is perfect, if it's a perfect capital market. Okay, means everything is perfect, and it will be, the agency cost will not arise. But agency cost mostly arises when there's inefficiency and dissatisfaction and disruption between the shareholder and management. So if dividends are paid, it indirectly monitors management investment activities and help reduce agency costs and enhance the value of the firm. But if dividends are not paid, there is conflict and dissatisfaction among the between the shareholders and management. There is high tendency of agency costs. So this is why dividend policy may be perceived as a tool to minimize agency costs. And why? I just got a chat message now asking me, why is this so? Okay, now I'll tell you why this is so. Dividend policy may be perceived as a tool to minimize agency costs because when we talk about dividend policy, when we say policy, it's actually a kind of regulated rules, a kind of direction how dividends should be managed. It's kind of fixed and regulated. So when there is a dividend policy, there's little or no inefficiencies, there's little or no disruption, and there's little or no conflicts. So just imagine, so that means agency cost is minimized. That means there will be no need for the agency cost because the dividend policy is very effective. Okay, means everything everything, the rules, the policy is adopted and it's working very fine. Or like if it's not there, so this is why the dividend policy may be perceived as a tool to minimize agency costs. Now let's look at the expectation theory. Okay, expectation theory suggests that the market reaction does not only reflect response to the firm's action, it also indicates investors' expectation about the ultimate decision to be made by management. So the deviation from expectation is more important than actual dividend payment. What they are trying to say that the firm should try to match the dividend payment to shareholders' expectation, and when they prioritize this, it means that the deviation from expectation is more important. Is considered important, and hence they try to minimize it and try to make the dividends payment should be equal to the shareholders' expectation. But in this regard, when we say shareholders' expectations, that the dividend payment should be equal to shareholders' expectation, it does not mean the amount that's supposed to be paid out should be less than what the shareholders are expecting. Most shareholders, even when they see the handwritten on the wall that expectation this time is going to be low and dividends payments will be low, they still always hope that it will be high, or probably be of what they be of better than what they've been earning, or not, or usually not less than what they expected. So in this case, it shouldn't be it shouldn't be that the dividend payment, even if it's not going to be the same with the shareholders' expectation, it's better. The dividend payment is better than the shareholders' expectations. Now, what is the conclusion on dividend policy? After saying all I've said, we talked about we've talked about a lot about the dividend payments, the residual dividend theory, the collected effect, the information effect, agency cost, and the expectation theory. Now, what is the dividends policy? As in, what should be, or what is the summary of conclusion on dividend policy? Okay, the conclusion is that that a firm's investment opportunity increases, its dividends payout ratio should decrease. That means as a firm opportunity increases, they get investment opportunities to invest more and make more profit. Its dividends payout ratio should decrease. Means they shouldn't pay out much. That means they should have more of retained profit and low dividend payment. And I guess you know why, right? Because if they pay less dividends, if they pay less dividends, they will be able to they will be able to they will be able to they'll be able to reinvest. They'll have enough money to reinvest. Investors use the dividend payment as a source of information of expected earnings. They are able to use the dividend payment as a source of information of expected earnings. They are able to gain and gauge, and calculate what their expectation should be. Okay, now relationship between stock price and dividends may exist due to implication of dividends for taxes and agency costs. Yes, like I already told you what agency cost is. So when there is relationship between stock price and dividends may exist due to implication of dividends for taxes and agency costs. Okay, so the shareholders should always prepare their mind for this. Okay, most times it's not a perfect capital market. So because of that, the implications of dividends for taxes and agency costs may exist. Then we have, based on expectation theory, firms should avoid surprising investors with regards to dividend policy. So the firms should minimize, okay, or reduce or even completely avoid not matching their dividends payment to their shareholders' expectation. Okay, they should just avoid surprising investors, even with regards to the dividend policy. And the firm's dividend policy should effectively be treated as a long-term residual. Okay. Now, moving on, we're going to see how dividend decision in practice, how the dividends, what is the reality of things. Okay, we're talking how it should be, right? It should be like this, it should be like this. All these are theoretical. Now, what is the rating? In reality, what is happening? There's legal restriction. Okay, because of legal restriction, we have issues in statutory and debt. Okay, the statutory restriction may prevent a company from paying dividends. Yes, this is the reason why the firm can decide, or is not obligated on them, is to pay dividends even when they have the profit, because they have the intention or they are already reinvesting. Then, based on expectation theory, firms should avoid surprising investors with regard to I was talking about. Okay, now debt and preferred stock contracts may impose constraints on dividend policy. Okay, because a firm could actually be indebted. Let's say, for example, they actually reinvested and not all the money they had to source for external finance, and this actually made them go out borrowing. So this will kind of impose constraint on the dividend policy, which is supposed to be operational, and we make them make the firm deviate from the policy, which they ought to have acted on. Then we have liquidity constraint. A firm may show a large amount of retained earnings, but it must have I'm sorry, my voice is a little bit hoarse because I actually not feeling very okay, but it's fine. I'm fine. So now we have constraint on dividend policy. So debt and preferred stock constraint may impose constraint on dividend policy. So in due course, the firms they deviate from the dividend policy because this could actually probably they need to pay their debt. So the dividend policy, which is supposed to outplay will be kind of deviated from. Then we have liquidity constraints. So what are the liquidity constraints? A firm may show a large amount of retained earnings, but it must have cash to pay dividends. If a firm showing an amount of retained earnings does not guarantee that it has cash to pay dividend. But the liquidity constraint means that whether you have large amount of retained earnings, it doesn't matter. They must say the word there, it must have cash to pay dividends at all times. Then the dividend earnings predictability. A firm with stable and predictable earnings is more likely to pay larger dividends. Yes, a firm with stable and predictable earnings is more likely to pay larger dividends. Then maintaining ownership control. Ownership of common stock gives voting rights if existing stockholders are unable to participate in a new offering. That means that control of current stockholder is diluted and issuing new stock will be considered unattractive. Yes. Now, what are the alternative dividend policies? There should be one is the constant dividend payout ratio. That means the percentage of earnings paid out in dividend is held constant. That means it should be constant. It should always be constant. Okay. Then though earnings are not constant and the earnings in each year will vary. That's why you see some companies, even they say they pay out 25% of earnings. The amount they pay out each year is not same. The 25% might be same all through the years for a period of 5, 6, 7 years. But if you look closely, the total amount they are paying out is not same. Some years they could pay out more than some, and some they pay very low. Okay. Now, alternative dividend policy also said that stable dollar dividend per share. That means the policy should maintain a relatively constant dollar of dividend every year. And management, when this happens, management will increase the dollar amount only if they are convinced that such increase can be maintained. You don't increase dollar amount, you don't just increase the amount of dividend payout, except you are able to maintain it for a long period of time. Stability is very, very important in this regards. Okay, that's what they're saying now, that stability is very important, and this stability should be sustained for a long period of time. This helps the firm's image and also helps build confidence and trust in the firm by the shareholders. Okay, what slide is this? I think we are in the dividends payout policy. So no, excuse me, I see dividend payout. So when we talk about dividend payout policies, it's also it's also an alternative dividend policy. It says a small regular dividend plus a year-end extra. The company follows the policy of paying a small regular dividend plus a year-end extra dividend in prosperity. Yes, many firms they give extra at year-end. That means this brings us to residual dividends, right? After all the retained profits have been reinvested and they still have a lot to spare, a lot more. So they enjoy the benefits of satisfy their customers, their investors more, and which are the shareholders, they pay them year-end extra dividends in prosperous years. Okay. Then we we're going to look at dividend payment procedure. Dividend payment procedure, like dividends are paid quarterly, okay, and there must be an approval, which before dividend can be paid out, is the approval there must be an approval coming from the firm's board of directors. Dividends cannot just be paid out if it has not been approved by the board of directors. Then when we talk about dividend payments, we have dates, okay, special dates which we must all know. We have the declaration date. This is the date where the dividends is formally declared, okay. We have the date of record. In this date, investors are shown to own stocks on this date which they receive the dividends. I mean investors shown to own stocks on this date receive the dividends. That means on this date, the investors that own stock or that bought stock on these days, they receive dividends. It's a date of record, because dividends payments are not same for all customers, for all investors, for all shareholders. I mean, it means that the day I bought my shares is not this day you bought your shares. We both invested on the shares at different times and different dates. So the date which you bought is recorded, and it differs with people. So on these days when dividends is paid out, the dividends of such stocks are paid out, and this is why all stockholders, they don't receive dividends same time. Now we have dividend date. This is 2 working days prior to date of record. This date excludes weekend. That means weekend, Saturday, Sunday, and public holidays. Then we have the payment date, the day when dividend checks are made. You know dividends are paid in check, right? Yeah, like a check. You are paid in check, and when you receive the check, you are supposed to go cash it. Okay, now moving on, we're going to talk about stock. Oh my God. We're going to talk about stock dividends and stock splits. Stock dividends, stock splits, and the likes like that. Stock dividend entails the distribution of additional shares of stock in lieu of cash payments. That means when you pay dividends by stock. You remember at the beginning of this class, in the first or second slide, we mentioned that dividends can be paid by cash or stock. So sometimes the firm can decide to pay dividends to their shareholders by means of giving them stock. But this is beneficial to the firm, because as the number of common stocks outstanding increases, the firm's investments and future earnings prospects do not change. Okay. Now, when we talk about stock split, it involves exchanging more or less, in the case of reserve split, shares of stock for firms' outstanding shares. So, while the number of common stock outstanding increases, the firm's investment and future earnings prospects do not change, and the stock splits and stock dividends are far less frequent than the cash dividends. Now let's talk about stock repurchases. For stock repurchases, we go. It actually this happens when a firm buys purchases its own stock. Okay, and this will help them reduce the shares for sales, the outstanding shares for sales. And a stock repurchase has the potential tax advantage as opposed to cash dividends. Yes, it has the tax advantages. So moving forward, what are the benefits of this? Okay, it provides internal investment opportunity. It modifies the firm's capital structure. Yeah, you see, when a firm buys his own stock, it means his capital structure becomes bigger, right? And a favorable impact on earnings per share. There will be elimination of minority ownership group of stockholders. There also, it minimize the dilution in earnings per share associated with mergers, and the reduction in the firm's costs associated with servicing small stockholders. So now we know the benefit, okay? Which do the investors prefer? Which do the investors prefer? Do they prefer the dividend or stock repurchases? If there are no tax, no commission when trading stocks, and no information content assigned to a dividend, the investors is just indifferent. They don't care whether you should pay them their dividends or stock repurchases. Okay, so what we are saying summarily is that the taxes, the commission, and information content actually determines which is the investor preference. Okay, let's take a look at a share repurchase as a different financing investment decision. When a firm repurchases stock when it has excess cash, it can be regarded as a dividend decision. And we also have what they call financing or capital structure decision. This is when the firm issues debts and then repurchases the stock. This can alter the debt equity mix. Okay, a debt equity means is that how much it has borrowed and how much it has spent from its retained profits, the mix. And thus this is why it's called the financing or capital structure decision. So we also have the third aspect, which is a firm repurchases stock if it feels the prices are depressed. Yeah, if the prices are not good enough, the firm can repurchase their stock. But the decision to repurchase may be seen as an investment decision, not because it's just an investment decision. It's not seen because the stock of the firm is depressed or not. But when a firm keeps repurchasing its stock, at the long term, the firm cannot sustain itself, cannot prosper by investing only its own stock. It cannot. So even if a firm wants to repurchase its stock, it should be something that is very, very uncommon. Now we have stock repurchase procedure. It could be open market, it could be through tender offer or purchase. Okay, purchase is made from one or more major stockholder, and tender offer is made by the company to buy a specified number of shares at a fixed price, predetermined price set above the current market price. Then the open market, shares are acquired from a stockbroker at the current market price. Okay, these are the stock repurchase procedure. And that is the end of today's class. If you have any question, please ask. You can leave in the chat box, and if I'm still live, I will answer immediately. If not, I'll send in the answer. Thank you.